Wrapped, a Good Omens fanfiction, written by AppleSeeds, read aloud by SkyAsimaru. If you enjoy this podfic, you can check out the original story on Archive of Our Own. If you would like to hear more of my recordings or see some of my own work, you can find me through the pen and screen name of SkyAsimaru. Wrapped by AppleSeeds. Summary. After enduring the stress of Christmas shopping, Crowley takes his presents to a charity gift-wrapping stall. Finding himself completely enamored with Aziraphale, the adorable angel in an elf hat who wrapped his presents, he keeps going back with random objects from his flat and asking Aziraphale to wrap them as an excuse to see him again. The same dozen or so irritatingly cheerful Christmas songs had been playing on a relentless, hellish loop while Crowley navigated his way through the crowds in the shopping center, trying to find everything on his list. It was mid-December. He hadn't left it too late, in his opinion. But each shop just felt like venturing into another chamber in the bleak, torturous depths of hell, and he was desperate to get it over with. A burst of relief erupted in his chest when the sales assistant in the last shop he intended to visit said, "That's all gone through for you. Thank you. Merry Christmas." Music to Crowley's ears. Crowley forced something intended to vaguely resemble a smile onto his face, shoved the receipt into his pocket with all the others he'd accrued this evening, and wrestled with his shopping bags while the person in the queue behind him tutted loudly because apparently he wasn't moving out of the way fast enough. Crowley glared at them as he passed, but they'd already started harassing the sales assistant. Crowley clenched his fists tighter around the handles of his bags and headed back out into the main part of the shopping center. He only had one more stop, and then he could finally go home. There was a charity gift-wrapping stall near the customer service desk, and Crowley intended to take everything he'd bought there, so that by the time he left here, absolutely everything would be sorted, and he could just put his feet up and relax. The stall was surprisingly quiet, although from the nature of his encounters with people so far today, it didn't really surprise Crowley to learn that most weren't feeling particularly charitable. Crowley approached the stall, where a cheerful woman dressed as an elf greeted him with a bright smile. "Hello! Merry Christmas!" Yeah. Hi. "Do you have some presents you'd like us elves to wrap for you?" she asked, losing none of her enthusiasm, despite Crowley's mumbled response. He could barely imagine what he looked like to her, dressed all in black, surrounded by people in sparkly Christmas jumpers, absolutely exhausted, his glare almost permanently etched onto his features. Yeah, Crowley replied, lifting up his shopping bags a bit. "Wonderful! We elves love wrapping presents," she said, clasping her hands together excitedly. Crowley raised his eyebrow and observed a noticeable shift in her demeanor. She'd probably been so stuck in the routine that it had become habit now, not something she'd thought to adjust while interacting with grumpy sods like him. "It's a suggested donation of £2 per present," she continued, a little more subdued, but still more bright and cheerful than Crowley would have expected, given his attitude. "How many do you have?"
I've lost count. A lot?
Well, then, you'd better take them to Aziraphale. He's our fastest and most experienced present wrapper, right at the end of the table, she said, using an oversized candy cane to point to the long table behind the stall, where 3 other elves were currently occupied wrapping presents.
Thanks.
You won't have to wait long. Thank you for supporting us.
No, thank you for saving me from the pain of wrapping this lot.
The elf woman gave him a sympathetic smile before turning away towards the gift-wrapping table. When the elf at the end said goodbye to the person he'd been wrapping a present for, Crowley shuffled his way over to take their place. The elf, Aziraphale, looked up at him and gave him a beaming smile. "Hello, my dear. What can I wrap for you today?" The whole world seemed to get brighter in that moment, which wasn't as ridiculous as it sounds. It was, in fact, perfectly logical. Crowley's pupils had simply dilated, and so were letting more light into his eyes, and the gift-wrapping station was decorated with tinsel, reflecting the multicolored lights from the Christmas trees around it. And it was with very good reason that Crowley's pupils had dilated. The man smiling up at him was no elf, no matter how he was dressed. He was an angel. What had happened? Had he meant to be at the nativity scene and had got lost and ended up here?
Presents,
Crowley replied eloquently, before allowing himself to cringe privately. Aziraphale laughed, his adorable cheeks rounding and the corners of his eyes crinkling. Crowley stopped breathing for a moment. "Ah, my favorite thing to wrap," he responded with a sweet smile. Crowley's face started feeling strange, and he was disconcertingly aware of his own tongue. No one should be allowed to look that gorgeous wearing a stupid elf hat with a bell on the end of it, not to mention the light-up Christmas jumper, which he was apparently wearing a formal shirt beneath, with a red and green tartan bow tie to complete the look, which Crowley was now staring at, along with the strip of skin visible above his collar. "Where should we start?" Aziraphale prompted, and Crowley dragged his eyes back up a bit.
I don't know. It's all this."
Crowley dumped all his bags on the table, obscuring his view of Aziraphale for a moment. He took the opportunity to take a proper deep breath. "Well, you're certainly going to keep me busy, aren't you? Let me find you something to sit on while you wait." Aziraphale stood up, and it was all over for Crowley then. His gaze involuntarily drifted down the length of his body, right down to the Christmas socks he could see peeking out beneath the hem of Aziraphale's trousers. Aziraphale fetched a stool and set it down beside Crowley, gesturing for him to take a seat, then returned to his own chair, carefully setting each of Crowley's shopping bags down on the floor beside him before extracting one of the gifts. "Do you have any preference on wrapping styles?"
There are wrapping styles?
"Should I take that as a no?" Aziraphale asked lightly. Crowley's face was still feeling strange, and he discreetly poked at it. Oh, he was smiling.
That'll do it. Whatever you want to do is fine.
Ah, lovely. I do enjoy having a bit of creative freedom. Aziraphale selected a roll of gold paper from a tall box beside him and began efficiently and flawlessly wrapping the first of Crowley's presents. I do think gift wrapping can be an art form, don't you?
I've never thought about it.
I prefer quite a rustic style myself.
Brown paper packages tied up with string.
Aziraphale visibly shuddered. Crowley furrowed his brow.
What?
Oh, nothing. It's just that my boss is rather a fan of the sound of music.
Santa Claus?
Crowley joked. Aziraphale really must be an angel, or some other kind of divine being with the capacity for miracles. Crowley really wouldn't have predicted he'd feel like making jokes today. Aziraphale laughed politely. My other job. I volunteer to do this in the evenings after work.
Oh, that's nice of you,
Crowley said, with a ridiculously fond smile on his face. I enjoy it, Aziraphale responded, already done with the first present, complete with ribbon and bow, and on to the next. Certainly much more than my other job. My boss has motivational quotes from The Sound of Music up around the office, but what if I don't want to climb every mountain, Gabriel? Aziraphale addressed his rhetorical question towards the present, while creating a perfect fold in the paper. He accuses me of being frivolous, and yet I can't think of anything more frivolous than climbing every mountain just for the sake of it.
Might get you away from your boss,
Crowley suggested. Aziraphale glanced up at him. I suppose that would be something, he said with a smile. Aziraphale finished wrapping the second present and set it aside, before fishing something else out of Crowley's numerous shopping bags. So, what do you have planned for Christmas?
Nothing.
Oh?
Well, I'm seeing everyone before Christmas. Got to deliver this lot, and there's a couple of parties I'm going to, and work's having a thing, but, yeah. Christmas Day, it's just going to be me.
Are you happy about that?
Honestly, yeah. This time of year's always hectic. It's nice to just shut the world away for a day and do nothing. How about you? I guess an elf would want a nice relaxing day too?
Yes, that's the plan. I mean, I'll be seeing my sister and her little ones on Christmas Eve, and we're having a Christmas dinner then. But I don't have any plans on the day itself. Besides eating plenty of food, of course, and watching some Christmas films. I'm also hoping to make some hot chocolate bombs. I just need to pick up a few more ingredients. Crowley squinted at him.
Exploding hot chocolate?
Not exactly, Aziraphale replied with a chuckle. They're chocolate balls full of hot chocolate powder and marshmallows. They break apart and melt when you add the hot milk. I'm planning to decorate mine to look Christmassy.
Sounds nice.
I hope they turn out well. Aziraphale started work on the next present, and Crowley intently watched the movement of his beautiful hands, deft fingers making short work of their task. Then it'll be a nice warm bubble bath, I think. I've treated myself to the bubble candy cane from Lush. Crowley refused to allow himself to think about Aziraphale taking a bath, and suddenly cleared his throat. He tried to come up with something else to say, but his mind had gone blank. He was tired, and Aziraphale was captivating. So Crowley just sat quietly and watched him work, thoroughly impressed by his present rapping skills.
Do I give you the money for this?
He asked once the silence started to feel uncomfortable. Yes, please, when I've finished. It's a suggested donation of £2 per present.
Yeah, the other elf said. Are you keeping count?
This is number 8.
Thanks. I'll donate more, though. You're doing an amazing job. They look brilliant.
Aziraphale looked absolutely delighted, and Crowley started feeling warm inside. Not the stuffy, horrible warmth he'd been experiencing for the last few hours amongst the crowds of people fighting their way around the heated shopping center, wearing clothes designed for the icy cold weather outside, but a pleasant warmth that crept all the way up to his cheeks. Thank you. I'm glad you approve. I love wrapping presents.
I hate it. It normally ends up as a battle between me and the seller type, and I never win.
Aziraphale grinned. Practice makes perfect, my dear.
And my past experience suggests otherwise.
I'm sure it hasn't been that bad. Aziraphale added present number 8 to the pile and commenced work on number 9. They continued to talk, and Crowley found himself completely absorbed in his conversation with Aziraphale. The irritating music and the hustle and bustle of people all around him, melting away like a snowman on a sunny day. He hadn't enjoyed himself this much in a long time, and was disappointed when Aziraphale announced that he was wrapping the very last present. Reluctantly, Crowley started gathering up the ones he'd already wrapped, returning them to their bags and hoping he'd be able to remember what everything was long enough to write the tags when he got home. There we are, my dear, all done for you.
Thanks, you're an angel,
Crowley gushed. Aziraphale dipped his chin and fiddled with the tinsel on the edge of the table, straightening it a little.
Seriously, thank you. I really appreciate it. They all look amazing.
You're very kind to say that. It was my pleasure.
Here you go.
Crowley tugged his wallet out of his pocket and handed Aziraphale 2 20s and a 10. Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you. Well, I hope you have a wonderful Christmas and enjoy that quiet rest you've been looking forward to.
Thanks. Yeah, you too.
It was lovely to meet you.
You too. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Crowley awkwardly picked up all of his bags and with a parting smile directed at Aziraphale, started making his way back to the car park. It wasn't long before he had an irrepressible grin on his face. It was only with hindsight that Crowley realized the foolish error he had made. He couldn't stop thinking about the glorious ray of sunshine, wrapped in festive clothing, he'd met, and how he'd made him feel. The way Aziraphale had listened attentively, smiled sweetly at him, laughed at his jokes, and made him laugh. Not to mention the cheeky, snide comments he'd made about his colleagues. Aziraphale had been a bright spark in the cloud of darkness that had settled over Crowley recently. And Crowley, like an idiot, hadn't thought to hold back some of the presents he'd bought so that he'd have a reason to go back and speak to him again. Still, days later, he couldn't get Aziraphale out of his mind, and he hadn't told Aziraphale that those were all of his presents, he realized. Crowley stared at the photo of his godson that Harriet had given to him last year in its fancy photo frame. That would do, wouldn't it? That evening, Crowley grabbed the photo and headed back to the shopping center. Crowley's pulse quickened as soon as he spotted Aziraphale sitting at the gift-wrapping station. He wasn't wrapping anything at the moment. His attention instead focused on a hot drink in a red cup, with copious amounts of whipped cream on top. Crowley disobeyed the arrows on the floor and sneaked in the wrong way so that he could approach Aziraphale directly.
Hi.
Oh, hello again. Have you been doing more shopping?
No, not exactly. Just had to, pick this up,
Crowley explained, extracting the photo frame from his bag. It wasn't dishonest. He had picked it up from the shelf in his flat. Crowley set the frame down on the table, and Aziraphale turned it around to face him. "Ah, and who is this cheerful young man?" he asked brightly, pulling a roll of blue metallic wrapping paper with a snowflake pattern out of his box.
My godson, Warlock. We made that snowman together.
Oh, how lovely! It looks like he was having a wonderful time.
Yeah, it was a good day.
Aziraphale carefully wrapped the frame up, and Crowley experienced a twist of guilt, knowing he'd just be unwrapping it as soon as he got back home. This really was absolutely ridiculous. He'd come out in the icy cold darkness to brave the crowds once again, for no other reason than to get a glimpse of Aziraphale's angelic radiance for all of... There we are, all done for you. 60 seconds.
Why didn't I bring more stuff? Thanks. That's, great. Thanks.
You're welcome. Crowley fished a few pound coins out of his pocket and handed them over to Aziraphale. Did this still count as charitable giving when his motivations had firstly been the fact he couldn't be arsed to wrap his own presents, and were now just wanting to spend more time with a literal angel? Aziraphale took the money from him, and Crowley's fingertips grazed his palm, which was just as warm and soft as it looked. Thank you. Is that all?
Yeah, that's it for today. Thanks. You okay? You want me to fetch you a drink or anything?
Oh, that's very kind of you, but I have one, thank you, Aziraphale said with a smile, taking a sip of what appeared at closer range to be hot chocolate with cream and sprinkles. He set the cup down and licked his lips to remove the cream that lingered there. Crowley's eyes widened, and an involuntary little whimpering sound escaped the back of his throat.
Right, yeah, of course. Well, have a good Christmas.
Yes, you too.
Thanks. Bye.
Crowley backed away and promptly fell over a Christmas tree. There were still 6 days to go until Christmas, and Crowley couldn't stand the thought of not seeing Aziraphale again. He scoured the flat, searching for anything he might be able to pass off as a present for someone. On Monday, he took a box of chocolates that he'd been given by a client at work and hadn't got around to eating yet. On Tuesday, he took one of his newest, fanciest shirts, ironed and folded as neatly as he could manage. On Wednesday, Crowley took his big book of astronomy, which Aziraphale wrapped with ease, saying that books were one of his favorite things to wrap. Crowley did have one other thing with him this time, an actual present, believe it or not, although this one was already wrapped.
And, this,
he mumbled, holding it out, trying to stop his arm from trembling. Oh, but this is already wrapped.
Oh, yeah, sorry, it's not for, it's a present for you. You know, to say thank you for wrapping all my stuff.
Oh, thank you. That's incredibly kind of you. I don't know what to say.
It's just a little thing.
May I open it now?
Yeah, if you want. If you won't get in trouble with Santa.
Aziraphale smiled and carefully undid the wrapping. Thankfully, the shop Crowley had bought it from had also offered a gift wrapping service. His eyes were shimmering with childlike delight as he uncovered the box of 3 festive hot chocolate bombs. Oh, thank you! These look wonderful!
I know you're planning to make your own over Christmas, but you can never have too much hot chocolate, right? And I thought there might be, like, inspiration or something. The way they've decorated them.
Yes, you're right. They look splendid. Thank you so much. You really are very kind. Aziraphale looked so thoroughly happy that it made Crowley feel incredibly happy, too. Happier than he'd felt in a long time. So will I be seeing you again, or are you all done now?
No, not done yet. Got a few more things to sort out. We'll probably be back tomorrow, if that's okay.
Of course, my dear. I look forward to seeing you then. Crowley handed over his donation and scooped up his neatly wrapped book that would shortly be finding itself back on his bookshelf. Merry Christmas, Aziraphale said brightly.
Merry Christmas,
Crowley said dopily in return. By Thursday, Crowley was running out of ideas and wanted his time with Aziraphale to last a bit longer, so resorted to taking a load of random stuff from his kitchen. The plan was to tell Aziraphale he was gifting them to a young couple who were moving into their first home together, and ask him to put them in a gift box for him. Aziraphale seemed a little surprised, but complied with Crowley's request, heading to the little shed beside the big Christmas tree to source a box of an appropriate size, along with some wood wool to pack in between everything. There was that niggling guilt in Crowley's gut again, exacerbated by the fact there was actually a queue for the gift-wrapping station today. Aziraphale began arranging everything into the box, while Crowley cursed himself for not just having the guts to ask him out for one of those festive hot chocolates he was so obviously enjoying last week. Instead, Crowley just stared at him, appreciating his beautiful twinkly blue-gray eyes and adorable white blonde curls peeking out from beneath the ridiculous elf hat. Is that you on that mug? Aziraphale asked, drawing Crowley out of his reverie.
What?
Aziraphale picked the mug up, and Crowley cringed. Why hadn't he grabbed something else? What possible reason could he have for thinking a young couple moving into their first home together would want a mug with his stupid face on it? Why?
No.
Really? It looks a lot like you. Your identical twin, perhaps.
Oh, God. Is he teasing me?
Crowley's cheeks prickled with warmth, and he breathed out a self-conscious laugh, scrubbing his hand over his nape. He's very handsome, Aziraphale continued, setting the mug down in the box and nestling it amongst some of the wood wool. Crowley's stomach felt like a whole herd of reindeer was galloping around in it.
Thanks,
Crowley replied reflexively. Aziraphale gave him a knowing look and smiled to himself as he continued wrapping the assorted random kitchen items. One solitary teaspoon, a ladle, a placemat, a saucepan lid without the accompanying saucepan, a washing-up sponge, a plate.
Oh, God, I'm hopeless.
Aziraphale didn't comment on any of the other items, instead just making conversation with Crowley by grumbling about the new mandatory festive fitness lunchtime sessions his boss had started running, complete with lectures about the effects of overindulgence. And Crowley had thought his own workplace was bad. How Aziraphale managed to stay so bright and cheerful was a miracle. They said goodbye, wished each other Merry Christmas for the zillionth time, and Crowley trudged away with his beautifully wrapped box of kitchen supplies, feeling like an absolute numpty. On Friday, he took his mobile phone to be wrapped, back inside the box it had come in, of course. He had considered just using the box itself, but it was too light, and the easiest way to get the weight right and make it believable seemed to be to just shove his phone back in it. Hopefully Aziraphale wouldn't notice the security seal had been broken. Well, hello again.
Hi, Angel.
Crowley cleared his throat and immediately extracted the phone box from his coat pocket, hoping not to draw attention to what he'd just said.
Just this today, please.
Ah, something quick and easy tonight.
Yeah,
Crowley responded, hoping his disappointment wasn't too evident in his voice. After the mug incident last night, he'd been forced to think of something that could legitimately and reasonably be given to someone as a present, and at least a mobile phone qualified. He wished he'd been able to think of more things to bring with it, though. Although, if he was really brave, maybe once Aziraphale had wrapped it, he'd ask him if he wanted to get hot chocolate with him. It was his last chance. The worst that could happen was Aziraphale saying no. But after today, Crowley wouldn't see him again anyway, so that was a risk worth taking, wasn't it? Aziraphale selected a silver metallic wrapping paper this time, expertly cutting a piece to the perfect size, and then laying the phone on top of it.
So, how are you?
Crowley asked. I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Finished work until Wednesday now.
Wonderful. I'm working tomorrow morning, but we're closing early. Then it'll be off to my sister's for dinner. Crowley smiled, wanting to continue the conversation, but not sure what to say. He was painfully aware of how quickly Aziraphale was wrapping the present, how their time together was slipping away like sand in an hourglass, and there was nothing he could do to stop it or slow it down. Aziraphale set the wrapped box down and began rummaging in his box of ribbons and bows. Then Crowley's phone rang. Crowley stared at the box on the table with wide, horrified eyes, his mouth hanging open. He cringed so hard he thought he might actually have pulled a muscle. Your present is ringing, Aziraphale observed.
Yeah, that's odd. Why didn't I turn it off? What is wrong with me?
I didn't want to say anything, but I did notice the security seal wasn't intact. Did you perhaps procure this from a less than reputable retailer? I'm certainly no expert on modern technology, but I'm fairly sure a brand new mobile phone shouldn't be ringing. It might have been stolen. The phone stopped ringing, then almost immediately started again. Crowley winced. Perhaps I should unwrap it and answer it, Aziraphale suggested. Maybe it's the person who the phone really belongs to trying to find it.
But you've done such a nice job with the wrapping.
You can't actually be suggesting you're still going to give this to someone as a present. What if it starts ringing while it's underneath their Christmas tree?
Yeah, it would kind of give it away, wouldn't it? I wanted it to be a surprise,
Crowley joked. He had no idea how he was going to get out of this. It was bad enough that Aziraphale thought he'd bought a stolen phone off someone dodgy, but Crowley couldn't think of a way out of this that didn't also leave Aziraphale thinking he was completely insane. I think that would be quite the surprise, especially if the police turn up at their door having traced it.
It's just a prank,
Crowley said, for want of another explanation.
Trust me, it's funny. They'll find it funny. It's not stolen, I promise. I'm absolutely sure.
So it's supposed to be ringing now?
Yeah, possibly.
I see, Aziraphale said skeptically, tying the parcel with a navy blue ribbon and attaching a matching bow. Well, there you are then.
Thanks. Right. Well then,
Crowley slipped the now wrapped box back into his coat pocket and handed a 5-pound note to Aziraphale. Oh, thank you. That's very kind. Right. This was it. Crowley's last chance to be brave.
I was just, I was wondering whether you'd like to go and get one of those fancy festive hot chocolates with me.
Oh, that's very nice of you to offer, but I'm afraid all the cafes will be closed by the time I finish here tonight. Crowley was far from surprised, but his heart still sank a little at that.
Right, yeah, of course. Yeah, no, then, I guess I'll just say, Merry Christmas again, and, leave you to it. So, yeah, Merry Christmas.
Wait, please, Aziraphale said softly. You haven't told me your name.
Oh, Crowley. It's, Crowley.
Crowley. The way Aziraphale said his name made Crowley's insides feel like they were melting. Not like snow this time, though. More like thick, warm chocolate. I'm busy tonight, but would the offer still stand for another time? Perhaps next week, after Christmas." Crowley stared at him, his heart beating incredibly fast.
Yeah, of course."
"Wonderful. I'd love that."
"Yeah? Really?"
Aziraphale nodded, smiling at him a little bashfully. Crowley's heart was really racing now, and he was starting to feel a bit lightheaded from it. "Perhaps you could give me your mobile telephone, and I could save my number in it," Aziraphale asked. Crowley's stomach lurched.
"My phone? You want me to give you my phone?"
he asked incredulously.
"Why? Why me?"
Crowley surreptitiously glared up towards the heavens. "If you please," Aziraphale replied, a twinkle in his eye as his gaze drifted down to Crowley's coat pocket and lingered there. Aziraphale watched him expectantly, the seconds stretching on until Crowley was forced to admit that Aziraphale had deduced exactly what he'd done. Crowley felt like he was going to die from the embarrassment, but just sighed dramatically and pulled the wrapped box back out, setting it down on the table. "Ah, marvelous, thank you," Aziraphale said, sounding a little smug. Crowley buried his face in his hands and groaned.
"Oh, this isn't happening,"
he mumbled against his palms, his cheeks feeling like they were on fire. "I'm very flattered, you know." Crowley peeked between his fingers, grimacing as Aziraphale undid his perfect wrapping and extracted Crowley's phone from the box. He passed it to him to unlock it.
"You really still want to give me your number after this?"
"Of course I do. I think you're very sweet."
"I'm not sweet."
"Were you bringing things for me to wrap just because you wanted to see me?" Crowley sniffed and shrugged his shoulders.
"Maybe. Why do you ask?"
"A saucepan lid on its own is a rather unusual gift."
"Yeah, no, not really. There's that flu going around and, remember in the pandemic when people got their hoodies and a saucepan lid and they put their hood up and,
Crowley waved his arms about a bit and trailed off, his heart fluttering in response to the fond expression on Aziraphale's face. "And the individual placemat?"
Yeah, the people that was for have a really small table." So my friends like weird stuff. That's not my fault."
"It's nice to see so much thought going into the act of gift-giving. Far too often it's seen as a chore."
"I can't think why,"
Crowley grumbled, glancing around at the dense crowd of people filling the shopping center. Aziraphale handed his phone back to him, and Crowley put it back in his pocket, without the box this time. "I could tell you weren't exactly enjoying being here, and that's part of why it meant so much to me that you kept coming back."
"I really liked talking to you. It was the highlight of every day,"
Crowley admitted. He certainly had nothing to lose now. "See, you are sweet. I'm very glad you decided to come back."
"Me too. You really are an angel, you know. I can't wait to see you after Christmas."
"I'm looking forward to it too. Although, do you need to rush home? Perhaps I could see you again later tonight." Crowley licked his lips, his pulse quickening with excitement.
No rush. No rush at all.
I finish here in about an hour and a half. Will you come back and see me? There's something I could wrap up for you to take home with you, if you want it.
You want to give me a present?
Crowley asked, a flutter of excitement in his stomach. Aziraphale reached into his box of bows and pulled out a gold one, peeling off the backing and sticking it to his own jumper, before looking right into Crowley's eyes and winking at him. Crowley completely forgot how to breathe.
Are you my present?
He asked croakily. I know it's silly, but I feel I can get away with rather a lot with a man who had me wrap up a mug with his own face on it as an excuse to talk to me.
It's not my face,
Crowley mumbled, feeling himself blushing again. Oh, that's a shame. I was hoping perhaps you could use it to make me a hot chocolate, and I could press my lips against it. It would almost be like kissing you. Crowley's breathing hitched, and he leaned against the gift-wrapping table for support.
You know the shopping centre's first aiders are going to be really pissed off with you if you keep saying things like that, and I pass out, and they have to come and deal with it after already having to treat all the injuries caused by people fighting with each other over the last squishmallow or something. Festive spirits really in the air tonight,
Crowley drawled sarcastically. Aziraphale leaned across the table and lowered his voice. I think I could at least help you get into the festive spirit, if you'd like.
Yeah, I really would. I'd love to see you again,
Crowley replied, not even trying to keep the hopeless fondness out of his voice. Aziraphale smiled warmly at him.
An hour and a half, yeah?
I'll be here.
Can't wait. Maybe I can take this bow off,
Crowley said bravely, trying to be flirtatious, brushing his fingertips lightly over Aziraphale's bow tie. Aziraphale made a quiet, distinctly approving sound in response. Oh.
Seriously, thanks for everything. Meeting you has been by far the best thing that's happened to me this Christmas.
Oh, thank you, Crowley. That's very kind of you to say.
See you soon, Angel.
Aziraphale reached out to gently squeeze his hand, and Crowley was left feeling all warm and fuzzy as he walked away with a massive smile on his face, searching for a cafe that wasn't too busy where he could pass the time. This situation called for something laden with sugar, sprinkles, whipped cream, and gingerbread. Crowley had a feeling he was developing a taste for sweet things, but no matter what elaborate festive drink he ended up opting for, nothing would compare to the sweetness of the angel he would be meeting later. The end. Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you for reading.
Please drop by the archive
And let the author know what you thought of their work.